This is one of those cases that has always kept me up at night. College students Kris Kremers and Lisanne Froon were visiting Panama when they decided to go on a very short hike in a beautiful jungle nearby. They were never seen alive again, which has us all wondering, did they suffer some sort of accident with injury? Did they maybe encounter a dangerous animal? Or did they encounter a dangerous person? The girls had both taken a gap year from school and they were traveling to Panama to specifically a small town called Boquete, and they were planning to be there for 6 weeks. So this all happened 2 weeks into their stay, and it was on April 1st, 2014. So here's what we know about that day. The girls had posted on social media stating that they were going to just sort of explore the city, but then they had a change of plans because we know that they took the dog that belonged to the family they were staying with out for a walk in this jungle. The family that they were staying with knew that something was wrong when later the dog returned back home without the girls. About 10 weeks after their disappearance, their backpack was found along a riverbank in the jungle. It was turned in by a woman who said that she found it there, and she said that she walked that path regularly and she had not seen the backpack on previous days. So the other thing is, this backpack was as dry as could be, and all the contents inside were completely dry as well. That jungle had extreme rain for at least 2 weeks. So if that backpack had been out there the whole time, it would have been soaking wet. Inside the backpack, they found a passport for one of the girls. They found an insurance card for the other girl. They found two bras that were neatly folded on top. So here's the thing about the bras. They wouldn't have brought extra bras because they thought that they were just going on a very short hike that day. So that tells us that at some point those bras were removed and placed neatly in their backpack. Also in the backpack, they found a Canon digital camera along with both of the girls' phones. Some of the things that were missing from the backpack were a compass that they had with them, a solar battery pack for the phone, and the key to the house that they were staying in. So we have a lot of information that came from their phones and from that Canon digital camera. We know that they attempted to make several emergency calls. Sometimes they were calling 911 and sometimes they were calling 112, which is the emergency line there. But most of these calls were incomplete because they didn't have a signal out there. One of the emergency calls did end up going through, but it dropped within 2 seconds. The girls were smart in that they kept turning off their phone to save the power. Sometimes they would turn off their phone for 14 hours, then turn it back on. They turned them off again for 19 hours and turned them back on. But the odd thing is, they never tried to send any texts during this time. And they also never tried to make any outgoing calls to friends or family, only the emergency services lines. Something else that was odd, Lisanne's phone died 4 days in on April 5th, but Kris's phone remained on for several more days. During that time, there were several attempts made to open up Kris's phone, but they were using the wrong PIN code. This happened over and over and over again. And something that's worth pointing out, if it was Lisanne just trying to open Kris's phone and Kris was no longer with us to open her own phone, it's strange that she didn't at least use the option because, when your phone is locked, you can still make an emergency call. This person didn't do that. It was like they weren't trying to make an emergency call. And I did verify that back in 2014, that was still an iPhone feature where if your phone is locked, you can make an emergency call. But that didn't happen during this time. Whoever had that phone just kept putting in the wrong passcode because they were just hell bent on opening up that phone. So here's where it gets even a little bit crazier. That Canon digital camera tells a story. So the first series of these pictures, they were all smiling, pictures of the girls, of the beautiful scenery and things like that. And then several days went, obviously, where there weren't any photos taken with this Canon camera. And then out of all of the photos, there was one deleted photo. And it happened to be the one photo that was between the happy pictures and the really creepy pictures that I'm about to tell you about. So this was on April 8th when all of a sudden this Canon digital camera was turned back on and around 80 photos were taken between the hours of 1 a.m. and 4 a.m. So all of these photos were in the complete pitch dark and they were just very odd, eerie photos. It was just of like the dirt or the plants or the sky above, like very disoriented pictures. So, one of the creepiest photos that was found with this series of pictures was a picture of the back of Chris's head. So, you could just sort of see her hair, and you could definitely see also a hint of blood in her hair. So, shortly after that backpack was discovered, they did start finding partial remains that belonged to the girls along that same area, along the same riverbank. So this is really odd as well because the bones that they found that belonged to Kris looked like they had been there longer. They looked like they had been bleached, whether that was bleached by someone or bleached by the sun. And Lisanne's bones just looked newer. They still had, some flesh attached to them and things like that. Lisanne's remains just seemed to be less decomposed. None of the remains pointed to clearly what happened to the girls, and they still don't have a cause of death. Furthermore, locals have stated that the area that they were in, it's difficult to get lost in there because there are signs everywhere that's kind of like this trail this trail this way, to exit, go this way. So it's unlikely that they were completely lost out there. I also forgot to mention that they did find a boot belonging to each of the girls, and one of them did have a foot inside. And they said that where the ankle had been severed, it was a completely clean cut, and it wasn't like it was something that was the result of an animal attack. With all of these unanswered questions in this case, I just cannot even bring myself to imagine what their final days were like, whether it was, a horrible accident with injury, or whether it was an encounter with an animal, or worst of all, in my mind, is an encounter with a bad person. My heart goes out to what they must have experienced in their final days.